what I'm wanting to share with this first part of the presentation are where are all the pitfalls, because invariably, if you assert these technologies are possible, any thinking person is going to say, why aren't they out there? I'm trying to provide you with the why, okay, and also the how. Now you get to our humble efforts, and if you want to know more about the work of T. Townsend Brown and Tesla and many others, they're on our website, and I'm not going to go through things that you can read there. I want to share things that, from our experience, that is unique to the access we've had and the experience we've had, which is, as they would say, unique and once in a generation opportunity. So some years ago, many years ago, I met a man who's a senior scientist at the Naval Research Labs down here. If you fly into National Airport, you see all those radar domes. It's the largest Department of Defense lab in the United States. And very senior scientist, like very, puts together stuff for the vice president, puts together stuff for admirals and joint staff and what have you. And I suspect if his name was known, he'd be the most famous aerospace designer of the last 30 years. But everything he's built has been for three-letter agencies, CIA and elsewhere. So he has been very interested and supportive of what we're doing. He understands the implications of the secrecy, the dark part. And so a few years ago, we have, as you see on our website, the Orion Project, which was a sort of a group that we put together. We wanted to raise the funds to have our own lab, didn't get enough funds, so what we ended up doing is providing grants to people. Some of them were people who said they could do things they really couldn't, but hey, you don't know. We're in a world emergency here, as I see it, so we were saying, like, we're not going to hoard this and sit on it, let's put it out there. But one of the grants went to this brilliant, writ large engineer who had studied under William S. Bender at the University of Washington, a true genius, who in the 1970s had founded, after his studies, Transdimensional Technologies, a company that was working on these, and he actually did make a generator, energy generating device. I think it was 74, somewhere around there. And that device ended up getting seized by a national security order. And he describes, as if it was yesterday, these thugs in suits with an all-access pass badge coming in with a national security order, and they said, you are now working for us, and that technology goes into what's called the vault, and all of your papers go into the vault, and you really don't have a choice. So for the last 40 years, he's worked for the national security state through a corporation that I know, and there's the details I don't want to go into for privacy reasons. And he basically does stuff for various agencies through this corporation. And he was introduced to me by this senior scientist at the Naval Research Labs and says, you know what? This gentleman's shepherds, as they're called in the intelligence community, shepherds meaning the people who are holding your security clearances and sort of looking out for what you're doing, and he had 5 of them, have approved him working with you, Dr. Greer, and the Orion Project, and to do a basic prototype, Tesla-type prototype. But he is not allowed to do anything that flies. Because when I had gone down to his lab, and I did, I went down to Huntsville and near the Redstone Arsenal and saw the lab. This gentleman had things that were floating around, nothing attached to them. It looked like miniature UFOs. Pretty cool stuff. The Naval Research Lab spent $1 million beefing that up and had things in their hangars floating around. And I've been in the NRL because people just bring me there because they want me to come in and share what I know, and I'll pick their brains and they'll pick mine. And I do not hold a security clearance, but I will not accept one. I tell people what I'm doing, and we don't want a security clearance. So what happens is that this guy says, look, I'll do this for you in my spare time, because he's still working full-time for this corporation doing stuff for the agency and other entities. I said, great, here's, I forget what we gave him, $60,000, $70,000. And About the time he was getting that thing built up, a team was sent down from the DC area to him, met with him at his SCIF, which is a secure communication intelligence facility, SCIF. Basically, it's an underground electromagnetic sealed facility. And in his SCIF, there was a former CIA director who had left the CIA and took a golden parachute into one of the big Beltway bandit corporations here in the DC area. And another team of people that basically threatened him, provided all kinds of false and defaming information about me that was outrageous. I mean, things like, I'm teaching people how to use consciousness to detonate weapons of mass destruction for Al-Qaeda. I mean, just insane stuff. I mean, you cannot imagine the full court press of defamation that attends trying to do something like what I'm doing. And basically, he got hold of us and said, I can't do this. I'm out here trying to do this at my house, in my own private lab. He had a secure lab that had a top secret clearance in his house. But he also had this other facility. But he says, I mean, my immediate intelligence shepherd said I could do this, but these guys have come in and have really threatened us. And I'm shut down. So we lost our money and didn't get anything. So we have done that to the tune of around $950,000 over the last decade. And all the work I've done on it, my family, my associates, have all worked pro bono. We've never been paid. And what we have learned from it are some very, very hard lessons that anyone listening to this needs to take to heart. Because there is a very narrow pathway out of the morass we're in. And because we've tried the others. We've tried providing grants to people. We've tried funding people who were not just, someone in a trailer park who had a wild idea. I mean, these were people with the provenance, their credentials. We visited, they've gone all over the world. Now, we have been caught in some outrageous scams. And I want to talk about some of those because the public has an idea that because you put something on YouTube, that's dispositive proof. It is not. It's sort of like my father-in-law used to say, paper does not refuse ink. If you want to just make something up. YouTube doesn't refuse an upload of a video. Nor does the internet refuse digits. You just put it out there. So it's a non-selective filter. Anything is up there. And a two-dimensional viewing on a YouTube is not a 3D proof that it is for real and that it's reproducible. So independent scientific validation and reproducibility, these are the sine qua non of science. And so we want to do this scientifically and very, very rationally. I won't give you an example. In a Latin American country, they went down to Mexico City a few years ago, and they had a device, small, and it was encased in resin or plastic. And you put it between, say, a fan and a wall socket. And you would, without it in there, you'd measure how, it was a kilowatt you running this fan, a kilowatt of electricity. With it in there, it was only using 100 watts. And it was supposedly saving all this power because it had a secret circuit in there that was pulling energy in from the zero-point field that was solid state. I said, well, it's theoretically possible. So I schlep down there, look at it, bring one back. We're testing it, sure enough, and it turns out the Southwest Research Institute, which is a very big testing entity in Austin that a lot of mainstream entities use, tested it and gave the same report. And they had that report. So it looked like, well, it had passed muster here. But, big but, B-U-T, nobody knew what was in the little plastic thing. It was sealed, and it was a trade secret. And I went, this is risky, because it may be a trick. So Eugene Malov, who was MIT, had a PhD, MIT, Harvard, who was on our team, who was murdered, as many of you know, a few years ago. And some other scientists, including these folks at NRL and some other facilities, tested this magical power-saving device. And they said, well, sure enough, they're not lying about it. It looks like if you just measure the energy. When we did an MRI scan on it, you know what we found? It had a circuit that was tricking the meter and making the meter run backwards, which can be done. It's called the power phase angle. Any engineers in here? And so very clever, multi-million-dollar scam that had taken him, and all it was doing was tricking the power. It was still using the same amount of power. It took untold thousands of dollars, and that was including everyone working for free, all these entities, Eugene Malab, my scientific team, everything, to get to the bottom of this. And that is why we will not pursue anything that is not open, transparent, and completely, if they're not willing to open their kimono fully, we'll say, you keep it and let someone else eat that snake oil. Ain't gonna be us. Now, I hate to be so blunt, but this is where you've really got to understand what we've been through. Now, you take that one example, and we've done that several dozen times all over the world at enormous cost to myself, enormous travel expenses, and in many times where people demand to have X amount put up as a retainer and da-da-da-da-da-da for you to even carry one away, and it's ended up to be this kind of a fraud. Now, this sounds like a real downer, doesn't it? And it is. But if you don't learn from these things, you're going to repeat them, which we will never do.